the Aragon Analytics review of the Spyderco Police G10. We'll get started with the basics, get the specs out of the way. The knife, the closed length on this is 5.56 inches. The blade length is 4.35 inches. And the overall length open is 9.91 inches with a weight of 4.9 ounces. Blade steel is G10 and it's manufactured in Seki City, Japan. The current retail for this knife is somewhere around the $149-ish range. I originally purchased this knife for a specific purpose. I wanted a slimmer, more discreet, but still large-bladed tactical folder to occasionally fill in for the Spyderco Tatanka that I normally carry. I was thinking, if I'm, in dress slacks or at a more, in a more formal attire, I wanted something a little more subtle. And the Spyderco Tatanka is a lot of things, but subtle is not among them. As you can see, this is a very thin and elegantly designed knife. As mentioned before, it has the G10 scales and full stainless steel liners. It's a lockback design, and as you can see, the blade is basically designed for effective piercing. It does have a very slight degree of belly, but although it's not designed for slashing cuts or slicing cuts, it does cut fairly well. As I stated, the whole idea of getting this blade was to kind of get something that I could wear with, dress clothing that would be a little more subtle than this particular blade here. And just to give you some idea of scale on the Police G10, we'll put that down here at the bottom. Here we have the Spyderco Military. Let's see if I can get that centered properly. And here we have the Paramilitary 2. And here's another common knife to give you an idea of scale. Spyderco Delica. And Spyderco Endura. So, just wanted to let you folks have an idea where it falls on the size front. So back to the Police G10. I'm really pleased with the build quality of the blade. When you pick this thing up and you take a look at how everything is contoured and finished, you just get this overwhelming feeling of, this, thing was made with an eye toward quality. It really kind of surpasses a lot of their more current offerings as far as, appearance of quality. If you compare it to the Spyderco Military, you can see this is a much more utilitarian blade, particularly in handle design. It's partial steel lining, and it's just not quite as elegant a design as far as aesthetics go. As far as performance, however, we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. The knife, I failed to mention, is able to take a pocket clip at all four corners. That was another positive for me when I was selecting the knife. Gave me the versatility to carry it in just about any pocket, any which way I wanted to. The lockback design is sturdy and strong. It is an older lockback, traditional lockback design, meaning there's no stop pin. It just the blade just butts up against the lock bar when it closes. But the lockup It is super, super solid. Lockup is really outstanding. About the only two dings that I really have to give this knife, one is kind of just a matter of taste, and the other one is what kind of disqualified this knife and led me to seek out some other options. Problem number one with this knife is that the deployment, you're not really going to be able to Spidey flick this thing. The old-fashioned lockback design on here is really not conducive to flipping. It's quite tight. Now, for a standard deployment, it's fine and it comes out nice and fast. However, it is, although not sticky, it is smooth, but it's tight and a little on the slow side. Now that I could live with. The problem that I ended up having with this particular blade, I'll try to show you here, well, without cutting myself, is the degree of flex in this relatively thin blade. If you compare this to a very common blade like a paramilitary 2, you can see the thickness of the blade stock is drastically different. And while that does allow for a decent slicing blade, in a blade that's primarily designed for defensive use with an eye toward thrusting, having a knife with that degree of flexibility kind of really made me worry about the overall strength of the blade itself. Now, the handle scales and the liners and the lock, everything is wonderful as far as strength, craftsmanship, aesthetics, but they just made this really flimsy, full flat grind blade. I don't know if it's due to the initial geometry that they were trying to adhere to, but when they went from a saber grind like on the traditional Spyderco Police, you know, you can see the saber grind here on this more traditional Delica. When they went to the full flat grind instead of the saber grind on this blade, it got too just really too thin for my taste, or for my ability to trust this thing to you know, perform thrust cuts in a defensive role. So while I can recommend this knife as, you know, maybe an oversized EDC blade, or as a food preparation knife, or as a collector's item, or as a piece of knife art, I cannot really endorse this thing as far as a defensive tool. Would it probably survive getting, you know, thrust into bone or rib by accident? Maybe. But if the knife is going to be used in a defensive role, it really has to be able to withstand a lot of torquing and unusual angles of force applied to the blade. And, well, folks, I just can't trust this thing. So, you know, as a collector's item, I recommend. As a well-made knife for regular cutting tasks, yeah. As a defensive tool, I'd say it's a miss. Thanks for coming by to take a look at this blade, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.